what you call it, because of he signed on with Twitter. Yeah, you're fucked. Anyway, thanks for subscribing, Jay. Let's start today's episode. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Webcomics Hubcast. It is me, your host, Nen, and today's episode number is, I don't actually know, I think it's 16. Very hesitant 16, I'm not gonna lie. I have been very busy. I don't remember anything. It's been a billion years since the last time I looked at a piece of content. Let me just check actually. It should be 16. No, it's 17. It's 17, episode 17. And today, we are talking about diversity and comics, and diversity in comics. I know there's somebody with that name, not that person. We're just talking about the very concepts of diversity and comics and representation in comics in general, because I wanted to do a news cycle I wanted to do a news cycle stream this week, and I just went, this is a waste of my fucking time. I don't care. The news cycle is terrible, and I don't really have time. So I'd rather talk about something I think is a little bit more interesting and can actually have us discussing a little bit more about the things that we make. So to start off with, I want to kind of clarify what I'm talking about when I mean representation or diversity. I'm talking about any attempt in your comic, for any reason, any attempt in your comic to portray the life and or individual like aspects of a person that is considered to be a social minority or a marginalized individual in your community. I'm using those words, marginalized individual and social minority, because I think I wanted to, because I wanted to be clear that, like, depending on the culture you live in, those definitions are substantially different, right? Living in Britain, the people who would be considered a social minority here might not be in the country you live in. So I wanted to, I wanted to kind of talk about that. I wanted to talk about what I've experienced as someone who reads comics in terms of like diversity. I wanted to us have a little conversation about what you, what you might think of in the work that you make. And I just wanted to talk, show you some embarrassing, terrible attempts at representation. Two of them are in the video. If you're watching the live stream before I change the thumbnail, you are going to probably be seeing the thumbnail picture using Miles Thoralis, which will be changed soon. And if you're watching the stream and you're looking at the screen, or you look at it right now, you'll probably see on the background behind me, there is a very strange comics panel, and we will get to that one. We will get to that one. So, when I'm talking about racial diversity or like not just racial diversity, frankly, marginalized representation in comics, I wanted to be clear that I'm not talking about just like physical book comics. I think there's a really big and very easy scapegoat of just looking at the way the physical media, way physical comics portrays different cultures and different people, and going, well, that's bad, therefore everyone's bad. I don't think so. But also, sometimes we look at them and we go, well, they're doing good, therefore everyone's doing good, and that's also not true. I think on a fundamental level, while physical comics has a very serious problem of representation, that is getting less and less with every passing year, and that's a really good thing. Webcomics, especially, have kind of entered into a space where, like, while none of them are always explicitly insensitive or explicitly like insensitive to the people that they portray, they can be very reductive, sometimes out of a necessity of writing, quote unquote, sometimes out of the sheer laziness and disinterest in doing more work, more than the bare minimum amount of work on your comic, which is a little bit annoying. Jay, I see that you're saying we need to make every redhead disappear from media. Please shut up. That I'm not dealing with that. So I think I think before I talk about it from a webcomics perspective, I think it would be good if I start from a physical comics perspective, purely because fewer of you will feel attacked, and as such, you might be more willing to listen to me when I start criticizing all the webcomic stuff. So, um, so let's talk about physical comics. My first memory of reading a physical comic in which in which any level of like race relations or minority politics or whatever was involved was Spider-Man issue, I think 78. Like, God, let me actually see. Amazing Spider-Man issue 78, I believe. I think it's 78. I might be completely wrong, but essentially, it's part of the original Amazing Spider-Man line. And like it's a comic in which Spider-Man is either is issue 78 or it came out in 1978. But it's an issue where Spider-Man basically has to go stop a prison riot. And when he gets in there and he sees everyone in the prison rioting, he realizes that like the reason the prisoners are rioting is because of how their unfair treatment. And he also notices that how a substantial amount of the prison population is minorities, and then eventually tries to help them get their gripes along to like the prison warden and the governor, and nothing really comes of that. I should make it clear, nothing really happens. It's two episodes where the first one, it's two issues of a comic where the first one he stops a prison riot by fighting a bunch of prisoners, and then the second one he's still doing that, and then he listens to them, and then he like helps them talk to people, and that's it. Um, nothing changes, nothing fundamentally shifts, and we never go back to that prison ever again. But I think what made it really meaningful for me, at least as a young Nen, was just like the fact that you could talk about that in comics was a really big deal. I don't know about any of you, but like feeling like the things that matter about the person that you are, or things that relate to the person that you are, or to people you know, or to just people without power, feeling like those things are discussed in a way that seems at least somewhat sensitive, or at least somewhat like aware of the problems those people genuinely have, is just nice, you know? It's just a nice thing to see. It's nice. It feels nice. It makes you happy, and I think seeing that was really eye opening for young me, because I at the time I think I had very different opinions than what I have now, and I didn't see a lot of the people in question that would have been in the quote unquote bad guys of that comic at first, the prisoners, as people, and it kind of did a lot for me, right? And I'm bringing it up as like a nice little story, because the only other story I have from the next story I have from learning about representation in comics is from the comic Spawn. I don't know how to explain it. In the comic Spawn, there's a period of time in the Spawn comics, but from you don't know Spawn, it's a comic series from Image Comics. Look him up. It's SPAWN. It's this character who's like linked to heaven and hell. It's complicated, doesn't matter. What matters here is there's a period of time in the Spawn comics that takes place a lot of the time during Jim Crow era America. For all my non-Americans out there, that's the time when America was more openly racist than they are now. Not like Europe is better, but that's what it is. And this issue of the comic takes place when somebody, hey Kiki, this issue of the comic takes place when somebody gets lynched. Somebody gets lynched, and then the person who is currently Spawn in this version of the universe takes it upon himself to get back at all the racists. He fights KKK members. It's a whole thing. But I just kind of wanted. I'm bringing this second one up as like my personal example of experiencing a really, really badly done conversation with a conversation about character backgrounds and an attempt to represent a social minority in a way that brings forward the genuine issues and problems that they might have had. And I call it bad because one, a lot of you probably don't know this, or maybe you do. A substantial amount of comics are written exclusively by white people. And I don't say that as like an attack on white people. I say that as like these people don't have like a fundamental, often don't do the research and don't have a fundamental or deep understanding of the very delicate social social politics that they're getting into in the representation that they're trying to achieve. And I don't think anyone does it out of meanness. I think it's just the nature of like wherever you live. Wherever you live, the whatever group of people is like the dominant social group will often control a lot of media, and they will try to write things about the group that you're part of because they want to make sure that your voice is heard. Sometimes they will do a terrible job. Right? And that's just kind of what happens. But reading that Spawn comic was very upsetting. I don't know. I don't know how you guys would feel, but how would you feel if you opened a comic, you read about something to do with your social minority, your marginalized group that represents you, whether you're gay or trans or a person of color or a person from a culture or a tribe that isn't accepted in the community you're in. And like you read that, but it was like just it almost looked like they were just trying to show how bad it was by showing like how much your life sucks, and that's it. There was no attempt to like discuss you with nuance. I feel like that would be very upsetting. And I'm bringing these personal examples up just as like this is like a way of showing like I have done the legwork of trying to read and understand the way current day representation is done in comics. I've put a lot of time into it, unfortunately, and especially and because this topic was a little bit last minute, I've also had to do a lot of refresh reads today, even though I normally would have done that over a couple of days. And I guess from a physical comics perspective, that's not what we've not even got to the web comics actually yet. But from a physical comics perspective, it's just a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird out there with a lot of the problems coming about just because people don't seem to like ask any fucking questions. And if you want to understand what I mean by like the reason the problem is weird and not bad, I will turn your attention to my favorite thing to show when people bring this up to me. Have you guys heard of Miles Morales? I showed him on a stream a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago, a few months ago, probably. But there's this chapter, there's this chapter or issue of a what if for Miles Morales from I think comic writer or artist, I can't remember, I think it's writer, Yehudi Mercado, right? And I don't know how to explain this to anybody. I feel kind of insane trying to bring this up because every time I talk about it, I just feel a little bit weird. But like, so I'm just gonna show you. So there's this issue of a Miles Morales comic. I believe it's Miles Morales. It's a what if? No, it's an issue of Thor. A what if issue of Thor where Thor is actually Miles Morales, and it's called Miles. It's called Miles Thoralis, and in this version, Miles Morales is Thor. And in his version of Asgard, there's graffiti everywhere. There's people are hanging their J's on the power line. He raps constantly. This is the Bleeding Cool article on it. He raps the whole time. Like that's like a big part of it. And then when he catches his hammer, he says hammer time, and his hammer is covered in like graffiti. There's a lot to take in here. But like that's what I mean by like with the issue of representation in modern day like physical comics isn't like done badly or done well. It's just done weird. I don't know how anyone feels about that, but like reading Miles Morales is just a little bit fucking odd. It's a little bit fucking odd. I know. What am I looking at? I have to read this. I've read the entire thing, and it's not from again. It's because of it's a what if Miles Morales, not a what if Thor. Sorry, but it's not the issue of somebody who doesn't care, right? Like back in the day, the issue in comics in terms of representation of diversity, or in generally in art, was like people don't give a shit, so they don't try. They don't want to put the time in. So they don't do the work in. Nowadays, the issue is they've put the time in, they've put the work in, they just don't get it. So like they just do weird things like that. Yeah, there's so many. They get forgotten. Like, fuck, you know what? You see the screen behind me on the podcast screen? Let me fucking get that up for you. I wanted that image behind me, right? Is from a comic that was published by Boom Studios, the people who did Berserk, and the ones who have all the Power Rangers comics, those fucking bastards. But this was published by Boom Studios, and it's called Strange Fruit. And Strange Fruit basically is in an alternate timeline where a superpowered alien like Superman arrives to Earth, lands in Mississippi in 1927, and he is a black man who is ripped. Like that is it. That is the story of this comic. And then there's this scene. There's this scene. I've read Strange Fruit. There's this scene where it's like where he walks forward wearing a Confederate flag around his fucking waist. He has no pants on. And this brother is like, oh yeah, them white folks really ain't gonna like that. There's a like car alarm going off outside of my building. And like, it sounds distressed and exhausted. And that is how I feel. That is how I feel right now in this very moment when I look at this fucking panel of a comic that a human being, I need you to remember, somebody drafted, storyboarded, penciled, lined, fucking colored, shaded, printed this. And at no point in this multi-stage process, nobody went, bro, what the fuck is this? And you guys might be wondering, well, okay, maybe Strange Tales is made by Strange Fruit, was made by a person, made by people who were just trying really hard to portray a certain idea, and they kind of fucked it up. But like, I need you to know this. Much like Miles Morales, which is written by a Latin American person, a Latin person, right? Much like Miles Morales is written by a Latin person, and much like the episodes of Spawn I mentioned earlier, and that one Spider-Man episode were written by white people, Strange Fruit is the pet project of two very white creators called Mark Waid and J.G. Jones. And I just want to say this to be clear. I don't hate these people. You know, like, I don't hate these people. America Chavez and Mockingbird, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like, it's important that like your character. I don't hate, like, actually I'm gonna get to that before, I don't want to like jump around, but I don't hate the people who've made these mistakes, right? I don't think any of them are doing it to be bad. The people who wrote this anti-Confederate, anti-racist story with a black superhero from space, clearly did not write it to be terrible. Like, I've read it. It's not intended to be terrible. Like, don't get me wrong, the harm is there, but the intent was to just write something where you empowered a group of people who typically were not empowered in comics. I get it. This does not excuse them, but I get it. And I think that's kind of where we are in comics right now. We've gone past the era, in physical comic media at least, of diversity and representation being a problem because people don't give a shit, to now when diversity and representation in comics is essentially in an era where people do give a shit. They all really want to do their best. They just don't fucking understand, or they don't really have the emotional link to the content to understand that drawing a person getting lynched physically in your comic does not make me feel represented. It just makes me tired and makes me want to take a fucking nap. You know, like, and I think it's worth saying. And as I said earlier, but some of you weren't here. I'm bringing the physical comics one up first. because when I hit the webcomics one, I'm going to be a little bit meaner. Because the physical comics one is a systematic failure that is slowly trying to rectify itself systematically and is getting better for sure. Like, an incredible example of it getting better is Doom Patrol, because Doom Patrol, till I fucking die, it's the best fucking thing in the universe. Everyone should go watch Doom Patrol. Go and watch Doom Patrol, then read the comics, and then come back to me after you've cried. But Doom Patrol is evidence to me in a lot of ways that we are moving forward in terms of representation of literally everything. Everything from how we talk about people with disability, to how we talk about people of different races, to how we talk about people with whatever fucking mental illness that they might have. Doom Patrol forever, right? And for me, that means a lot, right? And that for me is like an evidence of the fact that the entire industry is moving forward in a great way. For webcomics, on the other hand, I'm not gonna lie, guys, we're kind of fucking it up. Like, okay, comics have always had like, bad moments and stuff. And webcomics too have gotten overall, as a whole, less racist. I'm not even gonna say more sensitive, because that's not what's happened. They've become less racist, right? And that's really nice to see. Webcomics have stopped making unnecessary race jokes that have no value exclusively for the sake of being edgy. AKA all the fucking comedy gaming webcomics of the 2000s. Webcomics as a whole have decided that mental health is no longer a thing to be mocked and that trans people are no longer a fucking joke. It's really nice to see for the most part. But in terms of actual like attempts to represent different groups of people, webcomics largely have not done that. For the whole, webcomics almost exclusively represent two very specific types of people. One, white person with a white person with unimaginable body standard that we're supposed to really feel bad about. And all their friends and everyone they know and everyone they've ever met in their lives is white. Or the other thing, which is white person who's supposed to person who is drawn to look white but is actually supposed to be Korean and or Japanese. These are like the two groups in this is like that's like what almost every webcomic is, frankly. Like, I could open Webtoon right now and there is a 99% chance that almost everything on the screen will be some white person who is also friends exclusively with white people, whose entire cast of content is white people, and who the only people they seem to know in their apparently diverse, deep, big town is all white. The fucking dragon goddess from a different universe came around and she's also white. Like, come the fuck on. Are you that lazy? Shit. Like, is a skin tone killing you? It's fucking exhausting. Like, reading 3,000 webcomics for the call to action contest really just made it hit home how much of a problem it is to me. And how boring it is, frankly. That is all I see. Like, it's a combination of the fact that, like, one, in a medium where you can draw anything, upload anything, and most likely get an audience, you choose to draw the blandest character type possible. That is the generic white man. And two, you don't even draw like an exciting white man. Like, he doesn't do anything. He's not interesting. He's not emo. He's just generic. And two, when you draw them, you make their entire universe and everyone they know be exclusively that person. And it's very confusing. Like, when it comes to the traditional comics industry as a whole, everyone's changing and moving. And at least now, when you read a traditional comic, you're guaranteed to see even background characters of color, of different genders. And I mean that of different genders or ethnicities or just would speak differently, for fuck's sake. Like, even on an even basic level, that speak differently. But when it comes to webcomics as a whole, I read the same 9 things every day. And it is exhausting. It is tiring. Please, you can't all do this forever. You guys, you gotta have a new plan. We gotta do something else. Right? Like, and it doesn't make sense to me because most people I know who make webcomics are minorities, almost exclusively. I don't know anyone who makes webcomics on like a personal level. I know people on like a general level, right? But on a personal level, I don't know people who make webcomics that are men or white. Which again, I'm getting it. That are men or white, you know? And that's confusing to me. It's weird to me. I don't know. Maybe I am the weird one, but it's weird to me that like most of the people in a medium where the marginalized are given a voice, a medium like webcomics where you no longer need to get through the bullshit of the industry convincing them that your story is good. You can write whatever story you want about whatever culture you want at whatever time you want. That the only story that I ever see written is the same story all the time. The same people, the same kinds of people, the same speech pattern. Like nothing changes. Like I'm gonna prove this. I'm gonna open Webtoon right now. Okay, first comic is the Skullgirls comic. I'm just gonna ignore that one because whatever. I'm gonna go to the next thing on the banner. Vampire husband. Generic vampire husband. And nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with generic. It's just that that's what it is. Little lady mint. This looks like every single royalty webcomic of like the past 5 years. It's the same people. And it's confusing to me and I don't understand it. I don't know. Am I stupid here? Am I like missing something? Can someone tell me if like maybe it's me? Because it just feels weird. And like one of the reasons I've seen given to me a lot was very specifically for fantasy comics. That one, it's everything I've heard before, but it was given to me specifically for fantasy comics. Somebody was like, "Oh, Solo, we're talking about diversity and representation in comics." But somebody when I was asking them about like why their fantasy comic had exclusively white people, they were like, "Well, it's a fantasy environment, and if there were people of other races, I feel like it would be." Of other races or whatever, or genders or whatever, I feel like it would pull people out of the story. It would be immersion breaking. And I'm like, okay, one, that's a fucking like magical beast from another universe that you've turned into a girl. Two, your main character has like some level of emotional fucking bullshit where whenever they feel angry, they can like move time. And you think the immersion breaking thing will be putting a black person or a very obviously Asian person or fucking something in your comic. And I think it doesn't make sense to me because as someone who spent a lot of time as well reading like history, those people were fucking everywhere. Like people of color, of virtually every color, people of virtually every like gender have been around for fucking ever, right? Out in the open, in public. And like when people talk about like, oh, well, in the old times, the streets were full of people of like 900 different colors and races who spoke exclusively who didn't even speak the same fucking language, right? And sat around a fucking fire while one of them was cross-dressing, maybe even two of them were cross-dressing, and they were playing the fucking hurdy-gurdy. You don't know what the old times were. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What? Like, like I just, like dragon that turns into woman and like the woman is hot and wants to fuck you. Obviously normal. One of the characters is fucking Chinese. Immediately, you have ruined this story, you racist bastard. Like, like that's the mentality I should approach it with, and it's so confusing to me, dude. And also I'm not even gonna get into the fantasy racist excuse, but the fantasy racist excuse thing is so fucking annoying. But then I said, okay, cool, I'll leave the fantasy thing. I said, okay, what about, okay, fine, fantasy. Let's pretend fantasy is the walled garden that's allowed to be the way it is. Let's just pretend. It's not fucking true, but let's pretend. I move away from that. I go to something like romance. Why does everyone fall in love with the same guy? You know the thing I've loved reading the most recently, fucking unironically? Andy Bass. Like, I've been looking for something to read that isn't the same fucking 900 things I've been reading for years. So I decided to actually bother to read Andy Bass. I didn't like it when it first came out, not for any particular reason, just because I didn't like the art and it just didn't click with me mentally, so I just didn't bother reading it. But I decided to actually give Andy Bass a try. And you know what? It's nice reading a story where the people falling in love, one, aren't falling in love with the same generic man. And two, like, are actually fucking, they're actually like different people. They have different body types. It's weird, man. It's weird. Let me see. There's a question. How do you consider a creator's ability, experience, aptitude, and confidence with writing about characters themselves aren't in RL, the draw experiences? Oh, so basically, like, how do I consider their ability to write or create, and how it would, and how that might be affecting the decision not to write a story that is a little bit more complicated or a little bit more personal, a little bit more like about a social minority, essentially. I think that's what the question is. And I think just to a very large extent, I think even if you're a bad writer, you owe it to yourself to tell a story that is a little bit more meaningful to you than the fucking generic royalty story. Like, but also when it comes to like about writing about worlds and characters that you're not in, or like experiences you're not like able to draw from. And I think, and this is the very big thing, I don't think it matters how good you are as a writer. I think what matters is that you're asking questions. Curiosity is it's basically the same idea of being a good fucking like designer, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good of a designer you are and how many decades of experience you have designing things, right? People have 30 fucking years designing software and they still make websites with no like dyslexia color filter for educational purposes. You know what I mean? Like, they still make educational websites and then they told kids need a dyslexia color filter. Either make the website pure white or give them an inbuilt filter system, and they don't do that. Like, that's a thing that still happens. They're like 30-year-old plus designers. It's not about your skill. Your skill is irrelevant. It's about asking fucking questions. Like, here's an example, right? If I want to write a story about, I don't know, being trans in the American Midwest, right? Or like being black in the American Midwest, I can only attest to half of that story. It doesn't matter how good I am. I still call up my friends that live in the Midwest. I ask them how people talk there. I ask them what it's like being there. I ask them about the shit that they've had to deal with. I try to make sure it's from different socioeconomic backgrounds. I just go on fucking Reddit. And I literally go on Reddit. I go to Reddit and I like type on a forum and I'm like, bro, listen, I want to write a story about being black in Chicago. Who the fuck is black and from Chicago and poor? I want to know what it's like being you, because I want to write a story that is authentic to you. Like, ask that question, I think, is a very important thing, right? Your skill level matters, I guess, somewhat, but it's largely irrelevant if you're asking the questions. And the thing I don't like about webcomics, regular comics, they are asking the questions. In physical comics, everyone's asking the questions. They're just fucking up execution. Like, whenever you talk to any of these people in physical comics that write about black people, write about minority groups, write about fucking, even when you talk to like mangaka that write about like Japanese, about anti-Japanese nationalist content, or write about transness or being gay, like, the effort that you see that they go through is that they ask questions. If they fuck it up, it's because they fuck it up, right? It's because they're not very good at this. Like, it's just because they're doing their best. When it comes to webcomics in general, it's a matter of like, it's just people who don't ask questions. And to one extent, someone's going to tell me, oh, someone's already told me, great. Someone's already said, Callie's already said, well, a lot of them are young artists and teens, like, they're just trying to make a story and draw something. And I really respect that. And for the most part, if it comes off as a young person writing it, I don't actually care. I actually don't give a fuck about those. I don't like to criticize young people for the mistakes that they make. I think on a fundamental level, they are young and they are stupid, right? Um, they are young and they are stupid, and it happens. Like, I've been young, I've been dumb. I'm not gonna fucking call you out for it, right? But for me, for me, the problem I have doesn't come from those young people making mistakes. The problem I have comes from older, more established, or just older creators in general and the things that they do. And an example of that for me really, really hit home. I'm going to show you something that from a BL comic. Now, I really wanted to do a video on BL and how BL is not representation and how we need to stop pretending like BL writers are like decent fucking people. Because for the most part, I think they are, but sometimes they're not. But I just want to show you this from a comic that I do not like. I want to establish that early on. I don't like the comic. It has at some point implied sexual assault. And like that, it just continues to fly under the radar and make a shit ton of fucking money. It is, to me, not a good comic. And the person who writes it, I do not like for this. I'm sure as a person, they're probably very pleasant to talk to, but the things and the opinions that they have put through in their work have made me very uncomfortable as a human being about them. And it's probably going to like fuck with my reputation, but I don't really care. So this comic is called My Weird Roommate, right? And in My Weird Roommate, it's a BL comic about two gay characters. And in the story about two gay characters, one of the characters, who is called Punk, I believe, is a police officer. So the creator did an entire episode called Fuck the Police, where the person in question is like, wow, I'm a gay police officer. Do you know me? Why are you mad at the police? Why do you think that it's okay to be mad at me, to be the police? And it's a lot. There's a lot to break down in this. But what fundamentally I don't like about this is that it's an entire story where they try to paint a one-sided perspective on the idea of disliking authority. And they do it by making one of their gay characters, maybe before they already were, I don't remember, but by pushing the situation of one of their gay characters being a police officer. Now, I don't know about you fucking people, right? But like, the people who marched on fucking Stonewall and got arrested by cops, and the several amounts of gay people that got harassed to hell by the police over the decades and still to this day are rolling in their graves right now. They are rolling in their graves, literally sitting in the grave is doing a fucking 360. It could it's making so many points on fucking Tony Hawk's right now. Like, that is where we are at. This comic chapter stresses me. It stresses me emotionally. I am, as like a pansexual individual, this fucking irritates me. Because like, it's a poor understanding of the topic that they're talking about. It's a poor understanding, I think, or maybe just an absolute disregard for like the situation and like the amount of work it took for us to get to a world in which this fuckwit could write a BL story and not get arrested or maligned by their own community or by their own family, right? Or by their friends, or just have no friends ever again. Like, it's a sheer misunderstanding of how much work that took. And it's a sheer misunderstanding of the people that had to be overcome for that to change. Like, you want to fucking be a police supporting twat, go for it. Die in a ditch. I don't give a fuck. Like, you get to do whatever you want. It's a free country. But don't disregard, like, don't write a story about it where you've refused to ask questions, right? Refuse to ask the pertinent questions about the specific like topics, about the environment, to understand the history of something. And then you make a story where you you strawman someone you don't like so that you can push forward a narrative that you agree with, utilizing a character that 5 to 10 years ago, not even 30, 10 years ago, would probably have been arrested by the police for something because they just didn't like them in the wrong town, or would have had to leave the place they lived with the police there also spreading rumors about them because they were gay. Like it's just fucking confusing to me, right? Like this is what I mean Nimloth, when I'm like, it's not about your skill as a writer, and this is what I mean, Callie, when I'm like, it's not about how old you are as a creator. It's just about asking fucking questions, like giving enough of a shit to find the people in question and ask questions. And webcomic creators just don't fucking do that. Like they don't. Fundamentally, they don't. It doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter how skilled they are, doesn't matter how good they are. I almost never see them do it. And to some extent, some of them, and the ones that do make good stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, the Czech Police creator writes exclusively about, like, writes about a ton of white people, but their story is incredibly diverse, and they clearly ask a lot of questions, and they clearly have a very strong understanding of the topics they want to talk about before they talk about it, right? But like this person and like this person, and also just enough people in our medium don't ask questions. I'll never forget, like a few years ago, somebody brought out a comic where, and I'm not going to tell you who they are, but they brought out a comic where it was about chess pieces fighting. And they were like the whites versus the blacks. That's like literally like opening line of this comic, right? And I just went, hey, look, I know you probably don't know this information, right? But have you, like, I feel like you need to be a little bit more cognizant about when you put content out there to a wide audience, to everyone in the world, how maybe it could be perceived differently. And maybe you could change some of your wording so that you could like achieve something else, right? Maybe you don't need to call them whites versus black. Maybe you could call them something else. Maybe you could name the kingdoms after the color in a different language, right? Like you could try something else. And then they told me, I've already started writing the story. I've already started making the story. I don't care. I'm not going to change it. I'm sorry you feel that way. And like, and like I'm very much talking about race representation right now. But I mean this for a lot of other things too. I mean this for things like body type. Like Meriwether is a friend of the show, right? I know the guy. I think he's really nice. At least to me, he's been really nice, and I think he's a nice person. Meriwether has recently been drawing a comic where one of the characters in question that like get together, one of them is overweight and got less of a traditional body type. One of them is very like traditional body type, goth girl, whatever. And like the comments under that shit are horrendous. And like I've heard other artists talk about it, like in front of me, thinking I'm not paying attention, or I don't like the content or something, saying like some horrendous shit about the person that like is being like the characters that body type they're trying to portray. I've seen comments around. I've seen comments around about content like is it Miranda I'm thinking of? I forget who I'm thinking of. But I've seen comments around about things like Andy Bass's comic and the characters, or things like whenever stories try to have characters that are trans or that are anything. Yeah. Like Shoot Around. Shoot Around has a trans character, right? Shoot Around has a trans character, and Boyfriends has a trans character. And both of those comics get discussed really weirdly on the internet. Now, Shoot Around less so. It's not as popular. But Boyfriends gets discussed really fucking weirdly on the internet. And it's just a matter of like, it's just a matter of like, in our space, especially, in the traditional space, they make a lot of mistakes and are slow to adapt, but they're always adapting because often feedback comes internally. People internally tell them that's not good, and then it kind of propagates throughout the industry and everyone kind of changes their mind, right? with the way, but with webcomics, the fact that we made things on the internet, often our feedback comes instantly, and our feedback doesn't always come nicely, right? Like when we make content that is insensitive or bad or doesn't or not very good, really, not very nice, often our feedback will come from an audience member that might either really like us and be very nice, but usually it's from someone who fucking despises you, and they're here to tell you to fuck off. You know what I mean? And they're bringing heat. They're bringing heat. They're not coming in cold. They're not coming in chill. They're bringing heat with the intent of like slapping you down. So I can get that a lot of creators, they see that feedback, even if they're making something that isn't good, and they just kind of don't change because changing means admitting you're wrong. I don't want to give that dickhead the satisfaction. But I'm gonna be honest, I think you should give that dickhead the satisfaction because they're right. But also because it's not about that. Like it's not about you, you fucking weirdo. It's like it's more about how your content's affecting people. Like there's a thing, I'm gonna quote someone I'm not really a big fan of, but there's a thing PewDiePie once said, and he was like, when you get feedback, right? There's feedback you get, and there's a ton of feedback you get that's really good. There's a ton of feedback you get that's really bad. But even inside of the really bad feedback that you get, the bad feedback has good feedback, right? And it's not meant to be easy. You need to like be able to sort through the bad feedback to find out what you're actually doing wrong so that you can really change. Because the good feedback is often coming from people who love you, and you could shoot a man and they will tell you still did a good thing. But the bad feedback is really important because it's the thing you're gonna learn from, right? It's the thing you're gonna learn from. And I think for a lot of people, like they haven't learned that yet. They haven't learned that yet. And I don't know. Let me see what some people are saying. I don't like from Toon Talk Cassie. I don't like when creators who know nothing about a race or culture incorporate into their comics. You're right. I said it's an information problem more than anything. It's an information problem. From Calais, seen a lot of, I saw what you said earlier, Calais. I've seen a lot of these cases too where the creators are not American, but they're trying to dip into American culture portrayals of stuff. Yeah, that happens so much. The amount of people I've seen that do that is really weird. And then the way they perceive American culture is often the worst aspects of it or the most popular bad aspects of it. And that leads to you just having to that leads to a weird strawmanization of the people. I also think it's very cultural. Like I think one of the things that I've noticed a lot culturally, someone who moved to Europe when in my teens, I'm not from America, no. I'm from somewhere else, even more out of the way. But someone moved to Europe in my teens. Like, it was really weird moving to Europe and noticing that every bad guy in every film in Europe is American. If a bad guy has to be in a film in Europe, they have an American accent. They have some form of an American twang. They have an Americanism, an American relation. Every American bad guy is like from somewhere else, and it's just me coming at it from there's clearly a lot of inbuilt already cultural expectation, cultural I'm gonna go take this country's culture. I'm not gonna understand it because because where we live, that's just who the bad guys are. At the beginning of 2000s for the Americans, it was miscellaneous brown people. Now it's Russians. At some point, it was Chinese people. You get the deal. From Fried Crayon, not enough diverse creators, algorithms, white cis straight dominated corporations. These are all a combo of them, these or a combo of them are all probably reasons it isn't made or promoted. Although it's definitely more complicated than that. There's a topic of people who try to write, but they don't do research or ask anyone personally, that end up writing bad stereotypes. And I feel like it's getting a little better, but there's a long way to go. Yeah, you're right. I think you're right, Fried Crayon. I mean, totally. I should say this as somebody who has paid a lot of attention to the corporate structures of a lot of these companies. At least in the webcomic space, I will say. A lot of them are staffed exclusively by Asian people, which is not a bad thing. It's just me bringing it up as it is still a situation where there might be a bit of a cultural echo chamber with a massive amount of people from a very very similar, massive amount of second generation immigrants in America from very similar second generation immigrant backgrounds that might all be having very similar ideas. It's definitely not on purpose. That's the thing. It's just definitely not on purpose. It's just evidence of the fact that when people are considering diversity, it's not just about putting a bunch of, in terms of the people you hire into your company to ensure that the content that comes out is different. It's not just about hiring a bunch of different people that are all not white or a different race. It's about hiring people from different cultures, backgrounds, socioeconomic environments, and just frankly, people who don't think like you. And that's like really important. People don't ever seem to understand that socioeconomic thing, especially. Like people with fundamentally different opinions are also really valuable. Like hire people who don't agree with you, not because they're right and not because you want a contrarian, but because now you have a perspective that you haven't thought about that might be useful for multiple different reasons, either just as a way of seeing what other people might see or as a way of seeing what you're not seeing. And I don't know why people don't think about it like that. The problem with a lot of webcomics or art communities in general is everyone's way too nice or critique averse. And even the basis of critique is called hate. You are correct, Callie. And it's one of the reasons why in the Webcomics Hub server, I'm not like running around reading every single critique that comes up in the, because if you're not in our comic server, in Webcomics Hub server, we have a place called Comic Criticism, which is a little forum style page space where we all just post forum posts and like criticize each other's comics and discuss things, and you can offer criticism to other people. I do not police that page at all. I virtually never look in there unless someone tells me to, because I don't want people to feel like they have to gauge what they say. I think most criticism, as long as it is not done in a way that is clearly, obviously to hurt people, is meaningful. And I think when you don't have that, that person who's going to call you out on your bullshit, you often just make, like it leads you to making garbage, and it often can lead you to doing, like what Callie said, making very insensitive content, and nobody really tells you that it's insensitive. It's annoying. It's annoying that it's nice that the industry is welcoming to young people, but I feel like the industry I feel like we should also be very willing to be very harsh on people when we know the things they're doing are not good. I don't mean like in like your art style is not good. I mean just like if I see you doing dialogue that I think is disjointed, or I see you do something that I think is off, I should be able to say that. And even if you cry, that shouldn't be a bad thing. Because if I didn't tell you, 1,000 assholes is going to tell you somewhere else. I'm telling you as like and as long as I'm telling you in a constructive way, where I'm like, I don't think this is working. I think maybe you should try this, but I think this fundamentally is causing harm. If I feel like if as long as I'm saying it in a way that is meaningfully constructive, it should be taken on. But I know that our webcomics industry is very criticism averse. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why the comic industry, the physical comic industry in almost every country, is doing better than like the webcomic industry in terms of adopting diverse ideas, is because I don't know if you've worked in physical comics before or just know people who do. Everyone I know who works that tells me about it, they do really fucking like mean criticism. It's not like, hey Jeremy, this lettering looks kind of bad. Can you redo it? It's like you get a call from your broski who you're working on the project with, and he's like, that lettering is shit. More or less, right? That lettering is shit. You've gotten nothing across. It's very confusing and very disjointed. And then they go, oh, really? Fair enough. How do you think I would improve? Like, that's like their conversation. And if you worked in film, I worked in film, you get a lot of that. I remember once working, because I used to work in lighting, I used to do a lot of lighting work. I remember once working in lighting and working and I was trying out different lights. I was trying out different gels. I was just trying to flex my knowledge for some stupid reason. So I was trying to make the scene look a certain way. And I had the director walk up to me and just be like, you need to get off your fucking dick. I think that was very valuable for me, but like that's just how we communicated. But it was just more about like, I think it's very valuable when you have somebody who's going to come at you like that, right? Going to come at you like with smoke, with fire, right? To make sure that you don't make a fool of yourself and make you better. I don't know. That's my perspective. To ask questions like that takes time, and most webcomic creators are just putting things out there and keeping it moving. I wouldn't say that. I think a lot of them work very hard and take a long time to make things. Like I want to be clear. on this show, I probably have a very strong reputation of like every webcomic creator sucks. They do. I mean that in like a nice way. I mean that in like, when you talk about your brother or your friend, like they suck. That's what I mean, right? I think every webcomic creator is weak-willed in a lot of ways. I think every webcomic creator is kind of sucks, right? And I mean that with a lot of love. But even as much as I mean that, I know how much work they all put in. It's hard to be good, and it's hard work to do to make content in general. So I know they do put a ton of time, and maybe things get dropped here and there. But this is why someone said earlier, you might need a sensitivity reader, a beta reader, someone who will just talk to you about it. You might need to start checking your ideas a little bit more and getting out of your own echo chamber of shitty Spotify music and 7-hour and drawing 7 hours while listening to a podcast on which some dickhead tells you about the webcomic industry being bad. Like, you got to do something else, because I feel like that's the main issue. I think a lot of people take criticism as personal rejection. Yeah, because it is, right? Somebody told me 5 years ago. No, somebody told me, 3 years ago. Somebody told me that Webcomics Hub was a stupid idea. I got so sad and I cried for like several days. Right? Like the whole channel thing was dumb, and I was ruining my Discord, and like I was never gonna have a good community because I was just too busy trying to like become internet famous. I didn't give a fuck about that. I just wanted to make stuff about comics. But I cried for like a few days. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty useful to know because I had no direction, and it was really valuable for someone to say that to me and for me to realize that out of spite, I was going to prove them wrong, right? But it's a matter of just like that personal rejection shouldn't become a thing that like beats you down into eternity. And I guess because a lot of creators are young and you can't always verify how old they are, sometimes you give them that criticism to take it as a personal rejection, and it really does beat them down into eternity. Sometimes they're old enough to get it, and it still does do that. Before I give criticism, I usually ask somebody, what they're trying to achieve, so I understand like generally who they are. But I also try to ask them how old they are. I try to insinuate it. I just don't always say it up front. Most of the time, if you've ever spoken to me, at some point, I will ask you how old you are. I just sneak it in there and then move on. It's usually because I want to know how horrible I should be to you. Jokes. I just want to know like what level I need to speak to you for you to get what I'm putting down, right? And I feel like while our industry is very accepting and makes it very easy for young new creators to find a space where they can flourish and grow and improve, I think it leads to a situation where, like, as everyone said already, they just never change, they never get better, and it's weird. Because I don't even know how I want to go about it. Like, okay, this is gonna be the dumbest fucking thing ever. It is shocking to me that the first Black person in Unordinary is Lil Uzi Vert. If you don't know this, the Unordinary creator, I don't know what it was for. I think it was for a partnership or something. I don't remember. But the Unordinary creator at one point drew Lil Uzi Vert, the SoundCloud rapper. And that is the first Black person I have ever seen her draw in her art style, which is, a thing that is the real and exists. It's really weird. I don't know. Kiki, everybody needs a little rose from an art school teacher that wants to see you improve. I say this to someone who critiques badly sometimes. Yeah, I think a lot of the reason one of my friends used to talk to me about art school, and I've been reading I've currently been reading, literally Lil Uzi Vert. This is not a bit. I need to find it. But one of my friends talking about art school, I've been reading that blue, what's it called again? Blue Period. Reading Blue Period again. Right? I've been reading Blue Period again with a friend. Yeah. Okay, I'll get to the Lil Uzi Vert thing there. I'm reading Blue Period again with a friend together, and there's a lot of art school criticism that's like thinly veiled explanations as to why you suck, blah, 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 blah. But like, my friend that went to art school was like, art school really deteriorated my mental health because I just felt really bad about what I made. And I just, every time I got criticism, it just felt really like soul destroying. And then I read the comic and I was like, oh, it's not supposed to be soul destroying. it's soul destroying if you're not very good at taking criticism, and maybe that means art school isn't for you. Maybe you need a way that works for you better for getting you used to criticism. But fundamentally, the reason why art school criticism is so fucking horrible and harsh is because it's trying to get you ready for like your art career, making things with people. Because a lot of artists, especially baby artists, have never been criticized in their lives. Often the only people you listen to in art as a baby artist is your family, who typically just says, wow, you can draw, that's so cool. Or beats you down for other emotional reasons, right? And your friends who see your work and who typically say, oh, wow, that's so cool, or beat you down for other reasons. No one ever really like tells you why they don't like your work in a way that is meaningful, right? So I guess like that aspect is there too. Oh yeah, as for Lil Uzi Vert, okay guys, I'm gonna show you this. It's really fucking important. So this is the unordinary wikia. Lil Uzi Vert is a musician who specializes in taking an emo approach to rap. He is in the universe. Uzi and Serafina of Unordinary got to know each other at some point, and they became among those who got to address her as Sarah. Uzi Vert calls Serafina Sarah, so they're close. Sarah reaches out to Uzi Vert to get 2 tickets and 2 backstage passes to one of Uzi's upcoming concerts, to which was agreed. For the event in question, Uzi performed a set that included Demon High. The crowd loved them. Demon High is one of Lil Uzi Vert's songs. Afterward, they encountered Serafina backstage. They fist bumped each other, introduced them to her friend and +1, John. It was his first Uzi concert. He was overwhelmingly starstruck. Uzi wished to ease John's nerves and went to Serafina's idea for the 3 of them to take a photo together. Chapter 248. I just want you to see it because it's true. It wasn't a joke. See, I wasn't lying to you guys. I wasn't lying, I promise. I would never lie to you. Serafina and John go to a Lil Uzi Vert concert. Where the fuck is the concert? This is 248. It's supposed to be here. Where is it? Oh, it's not here. Whatever. I can't find it. But it's supposed to be somewhere in here. It's really funny. I think it's just absolutely hilarious. And I know, I'm happy that she got her bag. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm very happy she got her bag. I wanted Uru to get her bag, make her money. Good for her. It's just very funny that the first black person she's drawn is Lil Uzi Vert as part of a collaboration. That's it. I can't find the chapter. I'm sorry. I just think it's hilarious. Yeah, you gotta have thick skin, and I think in our webcom, I'm gonna go back to this topic, but we gotta have thick skin. I think in our webcomics industry, because we don't have that, we're not feeling free to make those criticisms. But at the same time, I think sometimes we do have that. We just don't care. It's weird. I don't know. Like, have you guys? I don't know. I want you guys to all just tell me, like, think about the things you've read, and this is everyone. So all you fucking people drawing on your tablet, give me a second, right, of your time. As people who have read a lot, who read a lot of comics, have you read anything in the past, like the last time you read something, right? Did you even notice that like the comic was the same generic 5 white people the whole time? Or the same generic people, generic body types, generic types of people. Did you notice that at all? Is that something that occurred to you? Did it come up in your mind? If I say it now and you look back on that, do you notice it now? Just in general, any of the comics you've read recently, do you notice it now? Will you change your reading habits or adjust them or attempt to read things with more diversity? These are genuine questions. I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to trap you. Like, be for real. If you're not gonna, just say no. I believe you. I notice it all the time, and I often at least consider putting down those series down. Fair enough. Honestly, yes, but that's because I became hyper aware of it during the past year or so. So, So Callie, you never noticed it, and that's not going to change your reading habits. Cool. Um, people are noticing it. Some people have said they've noticed all the time, and they often make decisions based on that. That's interesting. Um, yeah, most of your comics are pretty diverse, not on purpose, but they just are. And honestly, I subscribe to some other comics, but I've not touched them. Have a hard time getting into new things. I think it's important to be willing to do that. I think so. But Witch Hat Atelier is a weird story. I'm not even gonna fight you. It's pretty all right. Like, no, you're right. You're fine. You're good. Like, I don't even know how to discuss Witch Hat Atelier. Like, when it came out, I was like, I want to talk about this, and then I'm just like, well, everyone is like roughly the same skin tone. Largely, it tries to tell different stories of different kinds of people, and that is in and of itself enough for right now for me to just not bring anything up. But try to tell you, it does try its best to discuss different types of people, different aspects of humanity. I wouldn't say the characters are really different, but it at least doesn't have this shitty fantasy race excuse, so that's fine. I still mostly read American comics over Webtoon, though. I haven't gotten used to the scroll. I get that. I need to continue which. I don't know if I would read differently based on it, I guess. I would love to see more diversity in the comics I read, and seeing it does make me more initially interested in the story. In my honest opinion, from Nimloth, honestly, I don't care personally as long as they fit the character in context. Whether it's black, blue, green, yellow, falls in love with aliens, humans, cats, and dogs. I don't choose comics specifically for some idea of what I should resonate with. Choose comics for the story and how much it intrigues my entertainment, intellect factors. That makes sense, and I understand why that's the way you're choosing stories. I think in a lot of ways, though, like the reason I bring up the conscious decision to look for that or to choose things because of that is more because of the way it gets you out of a bubble that you might not know that you're in. I think for a lot of people, and it's not on purpose, you enter a bubble of content, right? Like there was a period of time where I was in this bubble where all I read was villainess stories because I was trying to understand the genre. And I didn't realize how trapped in that I was until I stopped, and I was like, everything reads really off. I need to get used to this again. But it's a matter of just like, I think when you make that decision, that conscious decision to read something for a reason of the kind of people that are there and how different they are to what you typically see in your stories, it not only allows you to be more open to new things, although if you're someone who opens every comic you see and you check it and then you stop reading when you don't like it, maybe it doesn't matter to you. But for people who don't do that, it's a great way to actually get out of your comfort zone. I think at the same time as well, when you read the different things, ideas that you think are bad originally might become good to you again. And what I'm saying, what I mean by that is it's gonna sound weird, but it's like I do not understand like a lot of things to be honest. But I don't understand the Asian culture of saving face. And I say Asian culture because it's very widespread in Asia. But the culture of saving face, of the need to save face. It's not about like reputation, it's about looking like you're saving reputation, right? That thing of like, it's not about actually doing the thing to make your life better. It's about looking like you're doing the thing to make your life better. I don't get it. So every time I read a story with it, and it actually used to make me very irritated. It would make me dislike characters. It would make me not understand the depth of the problem at hand in front of me because I was like, you're all wasting your time. You could just do this and get along with your life. And then one day I really tried my best. And I read a comic that was a slice of life story about a girl who was adjusting to the culture shock of moving back home and having to deal with all the save face stuff. A story I read because I just wanted to learn a little bit more about general Asian cultural stereotypes. And in the story, because she's doing a lot of work to try to get used to the family again after being away so long and being solo so long, it becomes a situation where I start to understand how deep this safe face thing. It wasn't just about like whether or not you personally believed in whether saving face had any meaning. It was whether or not it was more about like everyone else believes it, and I need everyone else for X or Y reason, or I've been taught to need everyone else for X or Y reason. And as such, I need to conform so that they don't reject me, right? And then when I went back to read all of my old stories again, it kind of made things have a little bit more weight. Like you would see characters that were crass. Like there was a story, I don't remember what it was, but the characters were all the characters in it were crass people who were all like, I don't care about authority, blah, blah, blah. But the moment they needed to save face, they really changed their entire personality just to do that. And I realized they were doing that because like it was more about how all those other people would perceive them. They didn't want to get rejected by the community around them, right? They didn't want to get rejected by the community around them, and that kind of really brought home like the stakes. These people weren't just going to lose on a deal or a job. They might lose on every deal and job forever because they live in this small community or because they do dealings with this area of the country, right? When you go read, when you learn about like Korea's like crazy fucking weird hierarchical system where money means you're better than people. Korea, one of the many countries where good people, where the idea is, what would you call it? People with money must be good, or at least are more important. And like there, because of how seriously it's taken, you start to understand why stories where rich people can just seemingly do anything they want from Korea and Japan exist, and why they are so almost insanely unbelievable. But that's because real life is more unbelievable than that, right? Like I was reading a Korean manhwa where the character bought a hospital and then kicked the woman out of the hospital that he didn't like, which I thought would be insane and illegal. But like in a country where like in a country where worse is done for less money, it wouldn't be the strangest thing, you know? And it began to make sense to me. It makes the things I originally thought were bad plot points morphed into better, meaningful plot points because I had more cultural and more cultural awareness of those environments. You know, it makes a lot of things make more sense. And I think when it comes to that idea of looking for something that stimulates intrigues you, makes you entertained, intrigues you, often you need to have that strong sometimes the story needs you to have a strong understanding of a very specific kind of environment that you might have no experience with. So it's important to be able to read it. Like I had to explain to one of my friends what fucking there's this thing, I don't know how many of you have been gay man. There's this thing in gay culture wherein, because it was really hard for people to meet up, especially back in the day, right? A lot of like cultural things have like a lot of cultural like behaviors have come up. There's one, I've completely forgotten the name because I just haven't used it in a long time. But there's one where if you want to like, you know, get it on with one of your with another friend, another buddy, right? You go to like bathrooms and there's a whole thing where you put your foot past the threshold of your bathroom stall into the other bathroom stall, and then the person touches your foot. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, right? I forgot what it's called, but it's like it's got a name. I've forgotten. Or like there's a whole thing from there's a whole thing from this sci-fi author I was reading about called I think his name is Lawrence Delaney. I think it's Lawrence Delaney, or no, Samuel L. Delaney. Yeah, Samuel Delaney. Yeah, he's a sci-fi writer, and like he's fucking cool as shit, right? But from sci-fi writer Samuel R. Delaney, and he was writing about like how he used to go to meetups to meet gay men back in the day when it wasn't acceptable, and how he would go there and you would only really see the way the places they met was arranged was such that you only ever really saw a handful of people. You never really knew how many people were there. But one day the police came in to like storm the place. And for the first time in his life, he saw hundreds of gay men running out of the literal forest. They escaped the police. This is like the 60s. They're all running out of the forest, out of the bushes, escaping the police. And that was the first time he'd ever seen so many gay men at one place that he was ever aware of, and it made him stop feeling lonely. It made him stop feeling off. But what it matters about it is like when you see when a story like that comes out, if you don't understand that culture, when a story that kind of tries to bring in those ideas that comes out, you don't understand that culture, you might think that everything they're talking about does not make fucking sense. Like, why are they meeting why are all the gay men meeting at a truck stop? Why aren't they meeting in a more secure location? Because they can't afford a secure location because they're poor. But you don't get that because like, you don't get that. Why isn't there a rich gay benefactor giving them like a bunch of places to stay? Because you want to get that. You wouldn't get that because you wouldn't understand like how being gay and rich back in the day didn't mean that you liked other gay people and gave them solace. It meant that you used your power to get sex and then fuck over all the gay people you knew. Like that was what it meant. You know, and that's a complicated thing to like discuss. But if you don't get that culture, if you don't get those ideas, and you approach a story, any story, you might just be coming in, finding it boring because you don't understand it, and finding it boring because you don't see the stakes at play. Now I'm going to do some comment reads. I read a lot of romance, isekai, and fantasy comics. And I'm always crushing on the same bad boy, dark-haired type of male lead. Cassie, get help. The biggest thing for me is honestly when I read comics by creators from different countries. The origin culture country has by far, in your opinion, the biggest difference is how a story is written. You are correct. It does. It really does have a lot of influence on that. I think as well, while that has a big influence, I think it also matters how they've been inundated into the culture. As someone as like I think we had a conversation earlier in Nimlot. You've moved to America. I think you've moved to America. Yeah, you have. You're an immigrant, so you get that, and like you understand that like as a first gen. There are a lot of things that are very weird that were very weird to you that you're used to now. That like your kid is just born in and like that's their life, right? And like as a second gen immigrant, the way that your kid's going to interact with your culture, and is going to kind of try and intertwine that with being an American is going to be completely different and completely like out there. So I think it's not just the countries of origin, but also like how they get into that culture really affects a lot of things. One thing will personally never sink with me is the over-the-top importance of respecting the elders. Yeah, because you don't get it. Like, you don't understand how much of Korea is about showing respect to elders. There's a whole thing about how you can't cheer someone's glass by raising your glass above their glass. Otherwise, that's disrespectful. And you kind of have to be aware of that to see, like, when people are doing power plays, you know what I mean? Like subtle power plays. Or like drinking before your elder drinks. You wouldn't get that, so you wouldn't see the subtle power play at hand if a young samurai character walks up to a table, sits down, like a young like warrior character from Korea speaking informal Korean, sits at a table and like drinks first. Like you don't get what he's doing. You know what I mean? Put that on the mug and out of spite, I proved them. Put that on the mug and out of spite, I proved them wrong. Honestly, yeah, I should. In that case, when you ask my age, I'm gonna say newborn, so you can be super nice. I'll never be nice to you if I know your age, Cassie. I'll just be more mean. Cultural awareness from Misty next. Cultural awareness makes such a huge difference in how people tend to approach art, both as a creator and a consumer. It's a really interesting phenomenon to observe and experience. Totally, yeah. And like, yeah. So like, Nimla, you totally get it. Your kid's coming into is American and is going to be is functionally American and is going to be kind of meshing that Americanness with Japanese, the terrible European mess that you are, and trying to like mesh that into one person somehow, some way. And I think that whatever your kid does while trying to mesh that, and if they start writing stories, that perspective is so unique and so different that it's going to add an entire layer of subtlety and things that we just never think of, right? It's always interesting to read stories about people whose parents especially parents from different cultures who are like having to navigate those cultures, and how like I read the story of a kid who from different cultures having to navigate those cultures, and how the kid was like, when I'm with this grandma, I talk like this, and when I'm with this grandma, I talk like this, and I have to do that or else I get in trouble. And like that's like a very unique story that you can tell, because you can only tell because you're a third culture kid. You're from one who's basically having to learn everything about your culture secondhand, with no firsthand, like with no people who are actively engaging in that other than your parents and maybe a few neighbors to really speak to. Um, it's interesting to me, and I think those perspectives are very, 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 very interesting and learned. And I think and webcomics is a space where like telling those kinds of stories is is very possible, is very easy, it's very doable, it's nice that we can do it. I think it's just a little bit upsetting that like while we're all doing this and we're all trying to tell these stories, we don't as a whole hold each other accountable for how we tell those stories, right? We don't hold each other accountable for like how we're getting across these ideas. And we also don't hold ourselves accountable for how we're getting across ideas. I once wrote something that I didn't realize was a slur for months, only to find out it was a slur. Only to find out it was a slur way too late in the game. Like way too late in the game. I should not have been finding that out when I did. Uh, it took too many weeks and too much time. And I guess for me, it's a matter of like, I guess for me, it's just like, I feel like if I discussed it with someone at any point, would have saved me some work, would have saved me some rewrites. Um, like if I explain what it was me trying to write cyberpunk slang. So I was trying to come up with like cyberpunk insults and slurs that they use, because that's a funny thing to do sometimes when you're bored and you're trying to write a cyberpunk story. Um, and I just used all these words, and then I didn't realize one of them was quite literally just a slur. It was the name I gave a character. That character's name is that character's name for the entire story. And you would think, with all the information I have in hand, I would know this, but I didn't. And it was only until I brought it up to someone, and they were like, "Bro, that's a racist." That's no. um, and I feel like a lot of us don't do that. A lot of us don't get those checks, don't do those background checks. And simultaneously, I feel like even when we do that, sometimes we're not ready for how the backlash we will receive from that. And there's another thing I wanted to bring up today. I figure I might as well do before I have to go. Even with all the diversity in the world, right? Even with all the diversity in the world, some people will react badly to you trying to be inclusive or trying to tell a story from a perspective they don't like, whatever that perspective is. And often, one of the things that I've noticed about that kind of like situation is that if you're not considering your story carefully, if you're not asking enough questions, talking to enough people, looking at seeing what other people think about your stories, you might end up in a situation where you've written something and made something and put all this work into something, and you put it out, and the first thing that happens is you get inundated, fucking slapped in the face with some bullshit, with just some serious harassment, right? Like the harassment campaign that the creator of Religiously Gay had to deal with, which they did not deserve. They talked to, I think at one point I talked to them, or no, at one point I saw one of their DMs, and they just talked about how much stress it was post release. Just they lost a ton of weight. They were just constantly stressed out and exhausted. And in a lot of ways, like they clearly do not deserve that, right? They clearly do not deserve that. At the same time, I wonder why they didn't know that content like that might be or would be as divisive as it was. Like, I just wonder about that. I think about that a little bit every so often. Did they ask all the right questions? Did they talk to all the right people? Did people give them genuine feedback that would help them so that they would know how bad the backlash could get? Then maybe they would decide how they wanted to approach maybe the naming or the portrayals or whatever they might have wanted to change. I don't know what they would want to change. I frankly think there's nothing wrong with the comic, but it's all about like, it's more about like how you would have been, how maybe they would have been affected a little bit differently. I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe my perspective here is kind of off. I don't know what to do about that. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and it's something I noticed. I thought we'd have a little discussion about it, but like, I'm just a little. I guess I've been worried about where we're going. It seems like a lot more people than I thought are at least thinking about how that diversity works, and at least discussing things with their friends. So maybe I'm just doom and glooming in my room, and because of all the other things I'm worried about. um, but it's just I've just felt a little bit like we've always been going off in a weird direction, and I didn't know if it was ever going to change. It's just been it's been interesting. I should say though, and I'm going to give some. This is a rare Webcomics Hub W given to everybody in a win for comic creators, a win for us, capital C comic creators and readers. I have good news. For the most part, it seems like there's just more and more diverse content. Like I was dooming and glooming because I was worrying about the general like vibes, but forgetting the general vibes, more and more people seem to be writing and making more and more diverse content. No longer satisfied making the same basic ass fucking shit. They are trying to make interesting things, diverse things that talk about diverse cultures and people and types of people. You know, for all the faults you might have with boyfriends, the comic, I like it, but also I think it's nice that the characters are all gay and trans. You might think that it's a little bit annoying that everyone's a stereotype in that content in that comic, but it's going for a fuzzier, nicer feel. So I'm not going to hold it against the comic. I think it's nice that creators like Edbay exist, and winner of the Webcomics Hub Call to Action contest trophy. Jesse Page Dawson exists, people making content where their main characters are people, their characters are people of color, where they try to approach storytelling from that character's perspective and from the cultural perspective that they have as individuals. I think it's nice that we're all going that way. I think it's nice that things are going that way. I feel very hopeful. All my doom and gloom aside, I feel very hopeful. Seeing like if you told me 10 years ago that one of the number one webcomics in the world would be called fucking High Class Homos, I'd tell you were smoking crack. So like, it's interesting. It's nice. It's nice to see. The future has a lot of hope for continued improvement in representation and acceptance. And it's not an easy path. But we are heading that way slowly but surely. You really think so, Misty, and that's nice. That's a very nice conclusionary statement for me that I didn't have to write. In all, I genuinely think it's getting better. I genuinely think it's getting better. More and more content featuring more and more types of people. And while, yes, the biggest content, the biggest, loudest content is the dumbest content, you still get things like Time and Time Again, and we still get things like Castle Swimmer, as I said, HGH, and a myriad of other content that is trying to tell stories of different types of people and not the same story of the same 9 people over and over again. Oh my God, I don't give a shit if he's a prince. I don't care if he has dark hair. He is cringe because he is basic. Oh, Cassie, please, you need help. I have some diverse comics. I don't read them because it's diverse. It just so happens to be diverse. Yeah, makes sense. I'm just gonna sit here and call Cassie out and then move on with my life. Yeah, no, it's just really nice. It's really nice that things are changing. They are changing. And the last Webtoon contest was really nice because I saw lots more creators making lots more different types of content and trying their best to be, interesting. And instead of corporate, instead of like marketable. It was just really nice. It was nice reading content where the characters were made to be interesting. The people were made to be interesting instead of just being marketable. It was nice. It was nice to read. A lot more people making a lot more kinds of stories. I want you to know, Cassie, and I want you to know, Rosie, that the dark-haired emo man is not going to love you. He's not real. He's never going to love you. I just want you to know that now, forever. That's just the facts. Deal with it, you fucking nerd. Oh my fucking God. I'm having way too much fun with that. Yeah, that's actually today's episode. Ends on a really good note. Positive things, guys. Wow. A Webcomics Hub episode that doesn't end in depression and capitalism. Guys, I'm changing. You know, I'm changing. I'm becoming a different person. Score. One score. This is the one time I haven't ended an episode with, well, that's capitalism, and then clicked end stream and then gone to take a nap. And for everyone who's a patron who's watching this right now, the patron only video is coming out in like 2 days. Which reminds me, I have a patreon.com/webcomics hub if you want to give me money. But my Patreon is a donate what you want Patreon. So essentially, there's only a $1 tier. Well, there's only a $1 tier. You can put as much or as little as you like. If you want to put $1,000, you can allow me to quit my fucking job. If you want to put $1, I still love you. Patrons get extra videos and of course a shout out usually at the end of every stream if I can ever fucking remember, but I always forget because I'm an idiot. And right now we have more patrons than we have ever had before. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm very excited. And our patrons did not in order of recency are Sense X Sensei. Yeah, probably X Sensei, Jackie, Blot of Ink, Paige Critchlow, Bailey, Pastelfly, Cheesy, Geek Boy Studios, and Ashlyn. Thank you very much. You are all truly wonderful. I love you. I really appreciate all the support I've been getting making all this content. It's actually been really nice. It's nice. I don't know. It feels good. Feels good to make stuff. I know usually I'd have the end credit up thing now, but I just wanted to have to leave this up while I said that. If you are wondering, I just want to give you guys a minor heads up. Next week, sometime between next week and the next 2 weeks, my interview with the owner, CEO of Global Comics, Nimloth, who's in chat, hey Nim, will be going live on the channel. I am still talking with my research assistant as to how we should make it look, but I tried to make sure all of your questions were answered. So thank you very much, everyone who gave me questions on Twitter, on YouTube, and on the Discord channel. It will be up for patrons first. They will get to watch the entirety unedited audio before I even do anything to it. Hopefully I can make it look good, and hopefully I can make it short enough for people who don't. I can make it long enough for people who just want to listen to it, and short enough for people who don't care. Might have to make 2 videos. I'm not sure about that yet. Follow me on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. You guys know all my links. They should be down there in the doobly-doo. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully with the Voice Me video I've been working on, or at least with the German video that should be done. One of the two. One of those two should be done next week. Or I'll just blame my research assistant and take another break. Anyway, I'll see you guys next Saturday. Bye.